spoken about the role parents, teachers, educational institutions can play in ensuring our young adults remain safe in an increasingly online world. Today, we shift the spotlight on the role that governments and policymakers can play to protect our young teens from hackers, cyberbullies, identity thieves, abuse, and far, far worse. To give you a quick context, India has an IT Act and a personal data protection bill that has seen many iterations since 2018, but neither cater adequately to modern data protection requirements. So how can policymakers create and implement frameworks on data governance and cybersecurity to ensure our teenagers and young adults remain safe in an increasingly online world? To discuss this, we are joined by Atishi, Aam Aadmi Party MLA and Chairperson of the Education Standing Committee, Delhi, Kazim Rizvi, Public Policy Entrepreneur and founder of policy think tank, The Dialogue, Ashish Agarwal, Vice President and Head of Public Policy at NASSCOM, and Professor Avik Sarkar, Data Scientist at the Indian School of Business. Thank you all for joining us. Atishi, I'd like to begin by asking you, you've had a significant role to play in redefining Delhi's education model. Are lessons on cyber safety something you factored in? Because with the pandemic changing the way we teach our children and with the growing threats that they're facing online, they now have to be taught about cybersecurity from a very early age.
No, absolutely. I think you're right that the pandemic has really changed children's relationship with devices. I think that earlier it was very clear that parents would, to some degree, especially for young adults, monitor the activity of their children on devices, ensure that they had devices for a limited period of time. But with the pandemic and a lot of the education shifting online, the amount of access that students have, young adults have, to devices has really gone up. And that definitely does entail ensuring there is cyber security. But more importantly, I think it does entail educating children about the risks that are involved. Especially since we have seen that over the last couple of decades, there has been a lot of awareness that has grown around the issues of child sexual abuse with the POCSO Act, etc. coming in. A lot of awareness around that for children to be able to report any sexual abuse that happens. And the good thing is, fortunately, that in the world that we live in today, despite having cases of abuse, children are now calling them out. And I feel that the same really awareness needs to be brought about for any form of harassment or abuse that may happen online. Because while we have initiated a multitude of awareness activities around any harassment of children in, let us say, real life, but in virtual space, so far I think we are at a much earlier stage and a lot of work needs to be done on this.
Kazim, India has had a personal data protection bill that has undergone many tweaks and versions. Apparently, it is now going back to the drawing board. What are the gaps in the current bill that you would like to see addressed?
Thank you. Thank you so much for doing this, and thank you for having me here. So let's go back 5 years. In 2017, the Supreme Court adjudicated right to privacy as a fundamental right to all citizens of the country. And since then, the government has constituted a couple of committees that have looked into the creation of a personal data protection bill. And then there was a joint parliamentary committee, which was, of course, the second committee, which was formed by the parliament to look into it. And they came up with the report last year in December. And now it's being deliberated. So we hope that this year the data protection bill comes to the parliament eventually and is passed as soon as possible. Because as you rightly said, that this is a policy issue and we hope that it comes through soon. Now, there are multiple aspects to the data protection bill, but I want to start with talking about why it's important in this day and age. And I think the first and foremost aspect is that because of advanced digitization happening, and we are using internet for multiple services, we are online 24/7, accessing services, talking to people, connecting with people, doing professional duties, etc. There's a lot more data which is being collected by private and public corporations. And the present IT Act, Section 43A of the IT Act, which regulates data privacy, is not sufficient enough to look at the emerging business models and the current business models which use and monetize data. So there was a need for a bill which looks at every cycle of data, right from data collection to processing, to storage, and eventual deletion of data. Now, what is for most important right now is to have a consent-based data protection bill. And the present data protection bill actually talks about that the user should have more control and more ability to control on how the data is shared, why the data is shared. So we start with data collection. So the bill talks about the need for purpose limitation, right? So data should only be collected by a data company or a fiduciary for the purpose which is defined. It should not be collected or it should not be used for any other purpose outside the defined purpose for which the data is being collected, right? So that's number one. Number two is around data minimization, right? So companies should collect minimum amount of data to carry out their services and whatever services they have to provide, right? They should not ask for huge, vast details of person data information, which may not be required by them to process certain services. So that's another important aspect, right? Then we look at a situation where, we also have right to deletion of data. So the user should have a right if they want to delete personal information about them in the online space. The user should also have a right to know if this data is being shared with any other third party, what is being done with this information that has been shared. And once the services is done, then the deletion should take place. So this entire data cycle has been discussed in the data protection bill. And what has also been discussed is a data regulator. But of course, there's a lot more work required to make sure that the data regulator is more independent, has a committee, a selection committee which comes from multiple stakeholders, like not just the executive, but also experts, technical experts, ex-judicial members possibly. So we need to have a committee which is a little more, in terms of the constitution, is more independent, and the regulator should also be independent in its functioning. But there's a lot more requirement for coordination with sectoral regulators. So let's say when it comes to financial data, the DPA should consult and work with the financial regulator. Similarly, for telecom data, the telecom regulator, etc., because the data regulator duties cuts across multiple economic sectors. So it will be important to have a holistic data protection regulator which is independent. And we also need to make sure that the compliance part is smooth, companies and small startups, etc. It's smooth. And then we also need to make sure that the users are aware of their duties, aware of their rights, not duties, aware of their rights. And companies are independently audited to make sure that they are putting in the right systems in place to ensure that they comply with the data protection bill. So all those aspects have been discussed in the present data protection bill, and let's see where it goes, but we hope that it's passed very soon because we need to operationalize the right to privacy.
Professor Sarkar, do you agree with Kazim? What are the 5 things to your mind really that the government must include in any new data protection bill or in the Digital India Act, given the rapidly changing cyber landscape?
Yes, so thanks for inviting me here. I think it's a very pertinent and important issues that we are talking about today. India has got privacy as a fundamental right in 2017. And since then, we have started the process of forming a data privacy bill, which unfortunately is still in the draft stage since the last 5 years. So whatever data that we are sharing today for any purpose is all at risk, whether it's your data, my data, or any other foreign companies on social media data that we're talking about. It's all at risk because we do not have a data privacy law in the country to protect that data. So some of the key elements that we need to be careful about in India is that when we talk about data privacy bill, and we have several components in the bill, the draft bill, which is in line with the GDPR of the European Union. In India, we are a very multicultural and a varied society, and our population is very divided. I think the current data privacy bill is more catered to the youth and the adults in the metros and in the tier 2, tier 3 cities. But there is a large population beyond that also. And we have to also look into the aspects of how they look at data privacy from that perspective. So if you look into, you started about, say, children. Children are not that aware about aspects of data privacy, and they must be made aware of the aspect of data privacy. The second one is the people in rural India. where privacy might not be so seriously taken as an aspect, and they might not be even aware of aspect of data privacy. They have to be made aware of this, and what are the data privacy norms that should be put in place for them. Then businesses, small businesses, housewives who are also using a lot of social media, and a lot of their data is made available on social media and in digital format. We do not have an in-depth study to understand what are the privacy needs of these people and how they need to be protected, and whether one formula will work for all of these aspects. So there is a need for different level of awareness that needs to be there, and government has to play a very important role in the awareness drive for data privacy. Like, say, we are telling that, say, very simple example, if I tell you, like, we all know if we are sleeping in our house in the night, we need to lock our door. We might be living in a neighborhood which doesn't have any thefts or burglary, but still we lock our doors. That's a very basic hygiene factor that we do. But similar things for data privacy, that level of awareness is not there, that what we should do, the simple things that should be done to keep our data, our digital data safe. I think some of these aspects that we have to take care is to find out what the different groups want, awareness for these different groups. And when we talk about awareness programs, it should also be at a local level. For someone who is, say, at a metro adult, or person, someone who is in rural India, the awareness programs have to be very different.
All right, Ashish, you've in the past said how the passage of the data protection law will be a great enabler. Do you have some other policies in mind?
So I want to reiterate a few things here. It is passing of the law will be just an initial step. Right, given the fact that we are talking about data privacy protection, which is a much wider construct than simply data security. And this law will be applicable not only to all population, with all the variety and heterogeneity, including rural and urban, different languages, different economic backgrounds, and so on and so forth. Even in terms of the industry, it is going to have horizontal application. So small businesses, one-person service provider to a large global multinational organization. And then it will apply also to the government. So therefore, I think a key construct which will play out is that how does the risk-based regulation play out in this legislation? So we have done one very good thing in this law, that we have a concept of significant data fiduciaries, which is something that the GDPR has missed. So that's one thing which we feel will be very good for this law. However, at the same time, there are issues which will have to also focus on awareness and enforcement.
All right. So, Atishi, while India formulates data laws and policies, specifically keeping the young adults in mind, and of course, keeping teenagers in mind, we need to keep them safe online. And how can we provide them the tools to address situations of potential danger?
So I think that more than anything else, I think that children really need to be made aware of any kind of issues that may come across online. As I said, abuse, harassment, trolling are things that have been seen online across different platforms. They've been seen by young people, by women, by men, by adults of different age groups. And I think as children access online resources more and more, I think that more important than just having tools or having laws, which of course must be in place, I think that young people really need to be made aware of the possibilities that exist of harassment online, and to be able to have that confidence that if they do get harassed online, if there is any cyber stalking, if there is any abuse of any kind, then they should know that there are safe spaces available for them to be able to call out that harassment.
Right. And Professor Sarkar, as a leading data scientist, your message to policymakers for ensuring cyber safety for our young adults?
See, on young adults, the first thing is awareness. Young adults today are using a lot of tools on social media like TikTok, Instagram, and many others, but they are not aware of the harms that are happening that can cause to them. So that is the first very, very important step. And often a lot of the parents also might not be in a situation to provide that level of awareness, because we often as parents, we ourselves do not know about those things. So there has to be include this as a part of the curriculum, starting from, say, as low as standard 5 or standard 6, when students start using mobile phones and computers, about the awareness of what harm can happen to them when they're using this platform, so that they can take the necessary checks and balances, and also the monitoring mechanism. If there is a child below the age of 18, then parents should have an overview about what content they are seeing, because anything that happens, the parents will be liable at the end of the day. So that mechanism has to be put in place so that parents have an oversight, and there is a lot of awareness drives that is needed across all over India for the aspect of data privacy and cybersecurity.
All right, a short break now, and after that, a lot more on what policymakers can do really to keep our young adults safe online. Welcome back. Kazim, now to you. In order to cater to modern data protection requirements, what are the policies that India must focus on and implement soon? Remember, our young teens and young adults are all over social media. Each day, of course, we hear of new platforms. So really, what do you feel we need to do to cater to their needs at the moment?
So I think one, of course, is the need for a data protection bill, which the government should implement and enact very soon. But more importantly, to cater to young adults, I think there's a lot more requirement for awareness, right? And, it's important to have a regulate the companies, public or private companies, when it comes to data protection, to operationalize privacy. But with young adults, with kids going to school and colleges, I think it's critical that they understand, how important it is to protect your own personal information, right? So what is personal data? What does it constitute? Why you shouldn't share your personal data on social media or public platforms, right? What can go wrong when it comes to sharing your, let's say, Aadhaar ID or your PAN card number, or even your account details for that matter, right? So that's one critical element. Number two is also a sort of bringing this culture of privacy with young adults is very critical. And I think over here, we need to make sure that young adults understand what all controls they can take when it comes to their own mobile phones. So, don't give access to location. Don't keep your location on unless and until you're traveling somewhere or it's meeting somebody, right? Otherwise, don't keep your location on at the back end. Don't give access to location to apps which require it unnecessarily. Make sure that, your phone has sort of the latest software, etc. You also have to make sure that you do not, keep your mic on, or you unnecessarily give access to photographs or pictures, or for that matter, even a camera, right? So you have to make sure as a user, you are able to control whatever access you're giving from your phone to the apps which you're using. And to be able to control that, you need to be aware. So there is a lot more awareness required. And there's a change in the habits of kids, which is required also, because, we love to share where we are, what we're doing, posting pictures and talking about what we've done over the course of the day, etc. But at the same time, it's also important to know what you don't have to share, right? So when it comes to access to apps, when it comes to your own personal information, share it only when required, right? You can go around posting what you want to, but then if you're not posting something, then switch off the camera. Access to camera, right, to the apps. So these are some of the things which kids have to start looking at, and also just a little more a cautious approach towards using the application, understanding that websites should have HTTPS, making payments through secure means, not sharing your OTP publicly. And we did a study some time ago where we realized that sharing OTPs publicly, one of the biggest reasons behind the rise of cyber frauds in India. So don't give your OTP if somebody is calling you to ask your OTP. Never do that. That's not a good habit. It will end up causing you problems. So that's something which they should not do. Then also making sure that, if websites are asking for cookies, understand what those cookies are, why they are asking. So little more understanding, little more cultural change in the habits of young adults is required, and talking about it with their friends, with their parents, with their people in their societies. I think that's also critical, because we've not reached a stage where we have privacy as a habit. And to develop privacy as a habit, it's important to be able to realize that there's a lot of information which you may be sharing innocently, which is not required, and which could sort of lead to issues maybe in the future. So making a stop over there, using the internet, using whatever applications you are, please do that. Take advantage of the internet and the new applications, but make sure that you also have that control, that if something is not required, then don't share it, when it comes to the access from your phone. So I think these things are important. And also I think a couple of things around, passwords. And password, you should sort of have different passwords for different accounts. Make sure that your emails are encrypted, you're using encrypted services wherever possible. And you're also aware of, how much information you might be sharing. So they can read about it on the internet, but I think there's a need for an awareness program, organized awareness program for young adults to be able to, sort of realize their privacy objectives.
All right, very, very crucial insights really there for our young adults. And lastly, Ashish, to you, as we see it right now, things are in work in progress mode on cyber safety in the country. What is your message really to the government and the state governments on data protection, especially for our young adults in India?
So there are three things which I think are important when we are formulating policies involving children. We need to make sure that the age of consent is based on the risk associated. So we cannot have 18 as the age of consent for all children or teenager activity online. So for certain activities, it can be 13, 14, 16, and it needs to be risk-based. The second thing is that our law is going to provide a great tool called the consent manager, which means children will be able to, and everybody else will be able to manage their consent at one place. And so it will be very easy. The third and final thing is that irrespective of everything, once you give your consent, you allow processing of data in various manners. So it is very much important for you to take a very narrow view of consent, for which purpose you are providing the consent, and be aware of that. Once you do that very well, a lot of the risk can be avoided.
Thank you all for sharing your thoughts. We hope that governments, policymakers are all listening, and more solutions for a safer world online will soon be implemented.